My work friends and I were at our favorite pub last night. Not a really fancy place, but, cheap beer and close enough to home that I don't have to drive. The night started out normally enough. The four of us crammed into a small table off in the corner, mostly talking shop and shitting on our boss. Being this was the middle of the week, there weren't too many other people around, maybe around 8 or 9 others in the whole place. Everybody just kind of keeping to themselves, sort of people you'd expect to see in a pub on a Wednesday. Anyway, from where I'm sitting, I have a pretty good view of the TV behind the bar. Jesse, the bartender, is kind of lazily flipping through channels and passes by our local news channel. There's a brief burst of orange and red on the screen, which I register as a fire happening somewhere, which then disappears as Jesse switches over to the next channel. Something about the image looks oddly familiar, though. "Hey Jess, can you switch that back?" I call out to her. The news comes back on, and suddenly I recognize the building in the frame. It's my building. And it's burning. "Holy shit," I say, loudly enough that a few people follow my gaze to the television. That's my apartment. The crowd in the bar falls kind of quiet, everybody staring up at the screen now. The screen shows a wide shot of the outside of my building. The camera must be set up on the north end of the block because I recognize a lot of shops on the ground floor. Property management, dry cleaner, convenience mart, etc. The top left corner of the building is aflame. It's not a huge fire by any means, but it looks like a few units between the top 4 floors or so have already been engulfed by the flames. "Jesus, man," one of my coworkers says. That sucks." There's an uncomfortable murmur of agreement that passes around the table. I mean, I don't blame them. I wouldn't know what to say in this situation either. "Yep, I agree," just as awkwardly. Thankfully, my apartment is only about halfway up and located on the west side of the building. I cross my fingers, hoping my stuff will be okay. The camera cuts to a reporter on the scene. He's standing a little farther away, looking at the shops in the background. I can tell he's across the street on the northwest corner of the building. "Firefighters are expected on the scene any moment," he's saying, "and hopefully they'll be able to contain this horrible inferno before it spreads any farther. As I was saying before, it's very fortunate that everyone was able to evacuate the building before things got too bad, or who knows what tragic events may have unfolded." "He's really laying it on thick," my other coworkers joked. I chuckle a bit. All things considered, at the moment, it really didn't seem all that bad. But then, a few moments later, hang on," the reporter on TV says. "We're getting some updated information. It seems... Hang on one moment while we readjust the camera." The previously locked down camera starts to shift, the angle focusing on an area of the building about halfway up the west side. All the lights in the building are out except for one. I feel a weird creeping sensation as I start counting the windows from the bottom. 5 up, 2 over. That's my place. I swore I turned that light out, I think at first. Then I see it. There's a person standing in my window. The camera is zoomed out too far to make out any features, but it definitely looks like a man, and it's definitely standing in my apartment. I watch, petrified, as the camera zooms in closer. The reporter babbling on about the overlooked, ill-fated soul still trapped in the blazing such and such. As the image gets closer, I start to make out more details. The person is dancing. Or something. I don't really know how to describe it, but he's moving around a lot, and everything he's doing has this bizarre rhythmic quality to it. He starts waving his arms in the air, back and forth, and then he's waving them up and down at his sides. Then he's banging both fists on the glass. Then he's waving his arms over his head again, back and forth, back and forth. Everything he's doing is to the exact same tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. He starts jumping up and down, waving his arms over his head like he's trying to get someone's attention from a long distance. But everything is to the exact same rhythm, over and over again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. What the fuck? I say, my voice a hoarse whisper. And then the camera gets a little closer, and finally we can make out the person's features. It looks almost exactly like me. It's wearing the exact same clothes that I'm wearing now, clothes I changed into moments before leaving the apartment earlier. Its face looks almost exactly like mine as well, except for its eyes. Its eyes are far too big for a normal person. It also has this almost comical look of horror on its face. I don't even know how to describe it. Imagine if someone were pretending to look scared, but as a joke. It would have almost seemed funny if the circumstances were different, but instead it was just extremely unnerving. No one in the bar is talking now. Everyone is fixed on the TV. The person is still swaying and waving around, beating its hands on the glass or jumping in circles. I almost don't hear the reporter mention the fact that firefighters have rushed into the building and are now heading for my floor. Oh God, I think, without really understanding what was happening. Please don't go in there. I stare transfixed at the screen. From this angle, you can just barely see the top of my front door through the window, not too far behind where this creature is flailing about. Right now, it's holding its face in his hands and shaking its head from side to side as if saying no. Suddenly, the door behind it bursts open as presumably the firefighters have entered my apartment. The creature stops moving. For a second, I see its expression change. The comical look of horror is gone, replaced by a huge smile filled with enormous pointed teeth. Then the lights go out. We all just sat there, staring at the screen as the camera slowly zoomed out from the now dark window. No one says anything as we all quietly pay our bill and leave. I went directly to my sister's place across town and asked to stay with her. I told her there was a fire at my apartment and that's it. When I tried to find footage from the news online later that night, it seemed like they had edited that last part out. I don't know if any of you on this subreddit know what that thing was, but I hope they didn't put out that fire. I hope they let the whole damn place burn to the ground. The conversation was normal until one of the speakers suffered a sudden and violent death. It began when a young, fresh-faced youth with an old-fashioned camera draped around his neck approached a young woman sitting on a park bench. "Excuse me, miss?" he began tentatively. She looked up from her phone and brushed a lock of blonde hair out of her green eyes. "Yes?" she said, masking her mild annoyance with a smile. "I'm doing a photography project for my school," he said, "and I was wondering if I could photograph you." "Oh," she said. The request seemed to puzzle yet flatter her. She thought for a moment and then said, "Sure." "Great," said the young man, smiling. "Over there by that tree would be best." The woman gladly obliged, and the two strode over to the tree together, where the woman posed somewhat awkwardly with a smile that was almost genuine. "Actually," the young man said, "would you mind moving over a couple feet to the left?" "Just here?" the woman asked, shuffling over a couple feet. "Just a bit more," he said. She moved over a few more inches and smiled. Two things happened at once. The camera flashed, and the young woman's head exploded into a bloody pulp. Suddenly, the world's volume was turned down. My heart pounded in my ears. The woman's body went limp and sank to the grass, spilling blood from her neck in a torrential fountain. The bystanders screamed, and my hands fumbled for my phone to dial 911. My hands were shaking badly, and I almost dropped the phone into the grass. After I dialed, I held the ringing phone to my ear and looked up. The young man was nowhere to be seen. I wondered where he had gone, but the thought was driven from my head as a 911 operator picked up. 911, said the woman's voice. What is your emergency? But I couldn't answer. Something was severely wrong with me. There didn't seem to be enough air in my lungs, and my hands started to feel cold and numb. I was dizzy now. The world spun, and the ground rose up to meet my face, smashing my nose painfully. My vision began to swim in darkness, and then there was nothing. When the EMTs revived me, the woman's body had already been packed into the ambulance and taken away, though the blood stain remained, a dark stain of brown against the green of the grass. The EMTs said I'd had a panic attack and passed out. The police took my statement and they sent me home, numb with shock. A few weeks later, I found out that the woman had been hit by a stray bullet from someone shooting cans in their backyard a mile away. It was a 1 in a million shot, they said. A week later, I saw the young man again. He wore the exact same clothes, had the exact same haircut and cheerful grin, and the same old-fashioned camera was draped around his neck. I saw him by chance through the window of a restaurant, chatting up an elderly couple who sat in a corner booth. The silent, smiling conversation did not last long before the young man convinced them to get up and move to another booth. He lifted his camera to his face, and nothing happened. The old woman smiled and cocked her head to the side as if she was asking him something. He smiled back and raised a finger before lifting the camera to his face again. There was a sound like roaring thunder, and the wall of the restaurant exploded into dust and debris. A truck had crashed through the wall and demolished the old couple's booth. The young man stood there as if nothing had happened. He raised the camera to his face, took one more picture, and then turned to leave. He pushed the door to the restaurant open and walked out. He stopped and scanned the street. His gaze halted on me. The screaming and the chaos faded into silence as his preternaturally blue eyes bore into mine, turning my insides to ice. And then, in a moment, he was gone. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. I hoped after that to never see him again, but fate did not care much about my hopes. It never does. I was having dinner with my wife and 5-year-old daughter, Sarah, and the air was filled with laughter and the smell of my wife's baked pork chops and creamed mushrooms. Sarah was telling us a story about a strange man she'd met by the school who had offered to take her picture. She said he had a strange smile and a really old camera like she had never seen before. My heart sat up and began to beat against the inside of my chest. Trying to maintain the illusion of calm, I set my fork down gently on my plate, and I told her that if she ever saw that man again, she was to run, and that she absolutely, under no circumstances, was she allowed to let him take her picture. "But he did take my picture, Dad," said Sarah. "He wouldn't let me see it, but he said he'd come show me when it was ready in a week." "What?" I gasped. My voice was hoarse and small. My wife was looking between my Sarah and I with a look of concerned confusion. Sarah seemed to sense that something was wrong, and her chin began to quiver. "Nothing's wrong, honey," I said. "Everything is going to be okay." The lie struggled out of my throat, and the guilt of it seized my heart and squeezed it tight. Sarah's eyes were watery, but she continued what she was saying. "He said something else too, Dad," she said uncertainly. "He said it was very important." "Yes?" "He said he wouldn't develop my picture if you let him take yours. In the park tomorrow at noon." A wave of relief intermingled with sadness washed over me, and a tension I hadn't even noticed dissolved from my shoulders. I could feel the tears starting out in my eyes as I kissed my daughter's head, taking in a huge whiff of her scent. That scent of pure youth that makes the old feel young again. I kissed my wife hard on the lips, savoring the taste. Half lipstick and half the pork chops she had just eaten. I love you, Janine, I said. And I love you too, Sarah. They looked at me uncomprehendingly, concerned as if I had lost my mind. I've always loved my family more than life itself, and tomorrow at noon, I guess I will have to prove it. Perhaps I can get the better of the stranger, perhaps not. Wish me luck. You can run on for a long time. Sooner or later, God will cut you down. Johnny Cash. I can't stop, Scott yelled over at me, the yellow Mustang screaming down the Pacific Highway and braking 100 miles per hour. He slammed his foot down to the floor again and again. Nothing. It must have cut the lines, he continued, the panic in his eyes increasing. 107. Fuck. I don't want to die like this, man. I looked over at his terrified eyes and back up through the clear glass. The shocked face of an 8-year-old little boy rushed past us as we continued to pick up speed. 116 miles per hour now. And for the briefest of moments, the pulse of the adrenaline rushing through my body cleared, and a feeling of euphoria washed over me. This felt like a video game, and Scott was pretty damn good at it. An elderly couple, or at least I think they were, in a white van changed lanes without seeing us, and it almost ended for all 4 of us right then and there. Jesus, Scott said under his breath, managing to pull the wheel to the left and barely avoid them while somehow not flipping the car. 125. The euphoric feeling dissipated and the adrenaline pumped back into my heart. Watching Scott swerve and miraculously avoid every obstacle thrown at him, I couldn't help but feel admiration for my friend. There was an icy focus to his eyes now, and he wasn't about to give up. Despite everything that had happened, there would be no surrender. Not yet, at least. Hold on, he said, turning the wheel abruptly to the right and speeding up the runaway truck ramp. 118 miles per hour. I think we're slowing down. 95. Yeah, I think so too, I replied, taking a deep breath. 60. 30. The Mustang rolled to a halt as we breathed a collective sigh and exchanged a look of relief. I put my hand on his shoulder. Good thinking. We got lucky again, man, he replied, the terror never leaving his eyes as he stared over at me. He fought back tears and continued, I can't keep this up forever. And he was right. He couldn't. The brake lines being cut was just the latest incident since he had seen the film only a short time ago. There had been the house fire. Scott had barely gotten out alive, just happening to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning for a glass of water. After 911 had been called and the house had been evaluated, the authorities determined it to be caused by faulty wiring and nothing more. He knew better. There was the near electrocution, the jack stand for his car almost crushing him, and the wolves. I'd rather not speak about that one. What should we do? Scott asked me, the adrenaline dying and a blank stare falling across his face as he gazed out of the car window and up into the thick green trees and surrounding hills. I took a moment to gather my thoughts, and then finally replied, We persist. His exhausted body turned towards me as he dug into his left breast pocket and pulled out a cigarette. He nearly dropped it before gripping the steel handle tighter, flicking the flame and taking a slow drag. You're right. We'll figure this out. Scott smiled. Thanks for being here, Dan. If you ever want to leave, I interrupted. I'm here with you till the end, I replied. He nodded. And then he held his hands around his throat, first puzzled and then terrified. can't breathe. Help me. Help me. His eyes glazed over, and he went unconscious. I put my ear against his chest and listened to his respirations, shallow yet still there. His pulse was thready and quickening, yet it continued, and as his breathing slowed, I saw the red flashing lights of an ambulance speeding up the ramp behind us. Someone must have dialed 911. You've got to be kidding me. As a man and woman quickly got out of the ambulance and ran over to us, I readied myself and then exited the car. Help my friend. Scott had been having a terrible time the past few years. His father had died of cancer. He had lost each job he had fought so hard for, and his girlfriend even left him after he had proposed. I had no choice but to kill her later on and bury her body in the hills. I told Scott that she was trouble from the start. I didn't tell the two medics why he had passed out, and I certainly wasn't going to explain how I had laced the cigarette with poison this morning while he slept. I know what you're thinking, and yes, it was supposed to be painless. I just wanted to end his pain. In a way, death had been after Scott. Watching the two medics work desperately to save him, I found a grin falling over my face. He had never shown this type of resilience before, and it was impressive. Still, he had been through too much, and I didn't want him to struggle anymore. And it wasn't like I was just being selfish. With every attempt at Scott's life, I had been planning to die with him as well. That's what friends are for. Yet, each time he had made it. Sure, he survived the fire and what happened before. Yes, he had gotten lucky after I had cut the brake lines. And maybe he would even be saved by the paramedics in these bright green hills before the poison spread completely through his lungs and then into his heart.